So now we have arrived to the beginning of the Second War of the Diadochi by kings and generals.
The First War of the Diadochi was a titanic whirlwind, with one more partition, the deaths of major players, incredible betrayals, and absolutely chaotic geopolitics.
I'm telling you, you could make a show about this, guys. You could make like a frickin' Game of Thrones-esque show with just the Greeks and like the successors of Alexander the Great. Like, there's so much potential in history for great shows, and I feel like Hollywood has ignored it. So, you know, there's just so much potential, guys.
This was only a taste of things to come. After Antipater's death, Eumenes was still stuck in Nora due to being under siege by Antigonos. However, his fortunes did a turnabout when the ever-ambitious Antigonos decided to spare him due to his skills as a general, likely to get him as an ally, asking him to become the governor of Cappadocia and to become his right-hand man. Meanwhile, back in mainland Greece, trouble was brewing, as both Cassander and Polyperchon were gathering allies to eliminate the other and secure their place as sole regent of the Macedonian Empire. Lines had begun to be drawn in the sand, when Cassander, lacking allies in Pella, fled Macedon and arrived at the court of Antigonos.
Cassander had actually been opposed to Antigonus in the First War, having denounced him to Antipater. However, the prodigal son may have thought that the ambitious general would be in favor of more conflict in Greece to expand his own power.
The nearest person who could be sympathetic to him. He also gauged Ptolemy's support via correspondence, and presumably, after mastering the walk like an Egyptian dance, the new ruler of Egypt agreed to lend him aid.
I'm always jarred when frickin' Kings and Generals drops in a joke. Like, it's just so funny to me, I don't know why, but, yeah, Ptolemy really is such a great winner, because in the First War, he immediately killed, well, he didn't personally, but yeah, he wrecks Perdiccas, and then he's just chilling now. He's won. He got what he wanted, Egypt, and now he's just there, and everyone's coming to him. Like, he won. Like, and I find interesting is that he's not trying to go any further. Like, he seems content with just Egypt, which probably makes him smarter. Like, some of the other guys were trying to unify everything. He probably saw that as a lost cause, so he's like, I have my Egypt, I have my incest, so, you know, I'm just gonna mind my own business now. So, yeah, smart man.
In the meantime, Roshanak and her son were sent to Pella, where they were entrusted to the care of Polyperchon and later Olympias. The spark that spread the fires of war was lit in 318 BCE, when the ruler of Hellespontine Phrygia, Arrhidaeus, found out that Antigonos was preparing for war and began to arm himself in retaliation. One city, Cyzicus, did not comply with Arrhidaeus' command, and the furious satrap invaded and laid siege to the city. Accusing Arrhidaeus of attacking an allied city, Antigonos marched forth to confront him with 20,000 infantry, causing Arrhidaeus to stop the siege and flee to a fortress in the city of Chios. Meanwhile, in Macedon, Polyperchon was debating the best way to gather external allies. To that end, he issued a decree to appeal to the democratic rights of Greek polis, reversing Antipater's politically restrictive policies to get the Greek city-states on his side. Polyperchon also extended an olive branch to Eumenes. Sending envoys to the general, he offered to make him king in Asia and give him access to the Kinder treasury and the silver shields who guarded it. From the lands of Cybele, Eumenes agreed to this most generous offer, and
dang. I'm kinda glad to see Eumenes still around, because like I said, the First War of the Diadochi, I was impressed by him. So it's kinda cool he's just still there. In the sources that this is linked, Eumenes having taken an oath to be loyal to the throne, but that oath being changed somehow. This is likely embellishment by sympathetic authors, as Eumenes was just as ambitious of any of the Hellenistic kings and generals.
Abandoned Antigonos, defecting to Polyperchon's side. He also wrote to Olympias, the mother of Alexander the Great, to make her an ally of his, to which she agreed. The mother of the late great conqueror was presently taking care of her daughter-in-law Roshanak and her grandson Alexander IV.
Dang, Polyperchon is making a lot of waves. Though I'm just waiting for Cassandra to show up and kill everyone. Because I feel like things are going really good for Polyperchon. But as we know, Cassandra's about to show up any minute, so I'm just waiting for that bomb to go off.
Fourth, all of whom would prove to be valuable political chess pieces in the conflict to come. When Antigonus found out about Eumenes' treachery, he furiously sent an army into Cappadocia to intercept and capture him, but the turncoat eluded his soldiers. It is here that the war splits into two fronts, the Eumenes-Antigonus War in the lands of the east, and the Western Front in Greece. In the west, Polyperchon, who was claiming to be a defender of the freedom of the Polis from Macedonian control, faced an unexpected nest of opposition. First, he went to Athens to seize the fortress of Munichia. He was thwarted in this by Cassander, who arrived with his navy. Polyperchon then moved to the south, to the Arcadian city of Megalopolis, which was an oligarchy dominated by a major political figure called Damis, who was said to have fought with Alexander. Damis rejected the rule of Polyperchon, likely due to the latter claiming to support democratic polis. Unable to tolerate this slight, Polyperchon organized his forces, which totaled 24,000 infantry, 65 elephants, and 1,000 cavalry. He also organized a siege in Athens to occur in the meantime, of which we sadly know very little. When Polyperchon's army arrived at Megalopolis, they immediately put the city under siege, using towers and sapper tunnels to destroy its defenses. The local citizens' militia, numbering around 15,000 and led by Damis, was able to hold the attacking army at bay for a time, but soon the besiegers broke through part of the wall. Polyperchon, captivated by the glee of impending victory, ordered his troops to enter the city. However, the local militia detected the broken parts of the wall and stood tall, sealing the breach with their spears. Eventually, the attackers were forced to retreat after sustaining heavy losses. The breaches were repaired, and trap spikes were set up outside the city. Polyperchon was furious, and the next day ordered the ancient world's mother of all bombs, the war elephant, to move forward and take the city. Damis led the elephant's advance all the way into the makeshift repairs of the walls, where the traps his militia had placed managed to wound and panic the giant pachyderms. Simultaneously, the militia showered the great beasts with arrow fire. Through these combined efforts, the elephant attack was neutered, with the panicked pachyderms stepping on attacking soldiers and causing chaos within Polyperchon's ranks. After failing yet again, Polyperchon, angry that he was being resisted, retreated from the city. The siege in Athens also failed, with Cassander winning the favor of the Athenians.
It's hard to put into words the horrors that we've witnessed.
Meanwhile, on the other side of the Aegean Sea, two more battles took place in Byzantium. Here, the Antigonid navy faced off against Cleitus the White, a general of Alexander who had sided with Polyperchon and been instructed to guard the Hellespont. In the first battle of the Hellespont, which likely happened at the same time or slightly after the siege of Megalopolis, Cleitus defeated the defender of Athens, Nicanor, a Macedonian garrison leader who was stationed on Cassander's behalf in Athens. However, Nicanor and Antigonus were soon invigorated with reinforcements from the Antigonid faction. They secretly sent peltasts and archers onto the shore and organized their infantry to work as an amphibious force. Launching a surprise attack at dawn, they defeated Cleitus on both land and sea. Cleitus tried to escape on a ship, but was captured and executed by Lysimachos' men. Back in the west, Polyperchon was now in trouble, as more and more Greek cities joined Cassander. Thus, he fled northward, taking Roshanak and Alexander IV to Epirus. There, he and Olympias managed to gain military support from the Epirot king, who was from the same family as Olympias. Philip III, Alexander's brother and candidate for the throne, and Adaea Eurydice, daughter of Kinani, Alexander's half-Illyrian sister, who had sided with Cassander, took up residence in Pella. But soon the Epirot troops invaded Macedon and took the city. The power couple fled to Amphipolis, where they were besieged and captured. Our accounts claim that Olympias murdered her stepson, Philip Arrhidaeus, and gave Adaea Eurydice a choice: to commit suicide by either hanging herself or drinking poison. Defiant to the end, the Illyrian Macedonian noblewoman tended to her husband's corpse, as was the duty of wives at the time, and then hanged herself by his side. However, she chose to
Dude, Olympias is also kind of ruthless, ain't she? Holy crap.
use her own belt, and not the noose provided by Olympias, choosing her own way into the House of Hades to meet her husband. Thus ended one faction of the House of Philip, leaving Alexander's children by Barsani and Roshanak to claim the throne of the world. The Hellenes were heading east once more, as Antigonos and his armies marched towards the rising sun in pursuit of a fleeing Eumenes, who was hoping to gain allies deeper in Asia. Eumenes reached Susa, and by the rivers of the Anahita, he tried to negotiate an alliance with some of the local satraps. Amongst the ones that joined him were Bukestus, who ran Persis in southern Iran, Eudamos, who had command of Indian garrisons, and the Silver Shield commanders, Antigones and Tutamos. However, Antigonos' forces were also swelling as he received some reinforcements.
Antigonus was joined by Paethon, who was defeated by the Persian satraps under Paeketus after he failed to take Parthia. Seleucus also joined Antigonus, but due to insufficient soldiers in Babylon, he was unable to join him in Susa. To that end, Antigonus left a few of his soldiers in Babylon to guard the western route and prevent Eumenes marching westward.
Reinforcements from some of his allies. He continued to march through Persia, hoping that these additional troops would allow him to win against Eumenes. The two multi-ethnic armies met on opposite banks at the Daz River in Iran, which the Greeks called Koprates. As the enemies began their standoff, 6,000 of Antigonos' men began to advance upon the only bridge across the river. Eumenes managed to rout them, and then, after a brutal melee that saw over 2,000 of Antigonos' men killed, the 4,000 survivors were taken prisoner. Knowing that the river crossing was now impossible, Antigonos moved north to Paraetekeni across the Zagros mountains.
Yeah, so Antigonus and Eumenes is such an interesting battle. I don't know why I've always kind of liked, Eumenes. I guess just, I don't know, I really took a notice of him in the first war, so it's now interesting to see. Antigonus got the better of him last time. They're both not above using underhanded tactics, so it's kind of like a weird, interesting equal rivalry that they both have, you know? So yeah, that was a smart move. Always attack an army when they're crossing a bridge, like, you know, that's how Archduke Charles bested Napoleon, like, always a great time to attack the enemy that needs to cross, right?
In order to move around Eumenes, Eumenes wished to go west, to areas where he could organize more effectively, but the eastern satraps feared that Antigonid raids in their lands would destabilize their power, so they compelled Eumenes to follow Antigonos and confront him directly at Paraetekeni, where the battle took place.
That doesn't sound like a good thing. Eumenes didn't want to fight him, but he's being forced to, and every time that happens when we watch these videos, it never goes well. So yeah, now he's having to fight a battle he doesn't want to. Good luck, Eumenes.
Antigonos' army consisted of 28,000 heavy infantry, 5,500 light infantry, 6,900 light cavalry, 3,700 heavy cavalry, and 65 war elephants. Eumenes' army consisted of 17,000 heavy infantry, 18,000 light infantry, 6,000 cavalry, and 125 war elephants. Eumenes placed his left flank under Eudamos and put some of his cavalry there, protected by a lancer vanguard. The center was dominated by his heavy infantry. At the edge were the Silver Shields, their right flank bolstered by Eumenes himself at the head of his remaining cavalry. The elephants and the light infantry alternated in front of these flanks. Antigonos, meanwhile, placed his light cavalry on his left flank, under his lieutenant Paethon. At the right,
I just love how the elephants has just been thrown in. Everyone is just spamming the elephant. Makes sense. It's basically like the closest to the tank of the ancient world. Though I will say that having the silver shields is interesting because they're the elite veterans of Alexander. So it's interesting Eumenes has them under his disposal. I'm wondering if they can make any difference.
Right flank stood Antigonos, with his firstborn son and heir, a young Demetrios, commanding the elite Agema cavalry, or bodyguard unit. He also put most of the elephants in this right flank, and put the rest sparsely in the center and left. Antigonos began the battle by moving his right flank forward, with the left flank staying behind as instructed due to their more lightly armored nature. The enemy's right flank was on high ground, but Python had to move forward because the ground where he was lower, and it was the only section of the army that could flank the enemy. Python used javelins and arrows to rain hell on the enemy elephants, until Eumenes signaled for his light cavalry to emerge and attack them. The Eumenid cavalry fought their way to Python's forces and managed to rout them off the battlefield. Following this, a contingent of elephants followed them and trapped them in the foothills. Meanwhile, the army's centers marched and crashed into each other, and a battle worthy of that of Heracles and the Nemean.
I like he keeps making these references to Greek mythology, comparing these things. Like, he fought with the fury of Achilles! Like, I don't know why, I kind of like that. It's kind of poetic. I don't think I remember Kings and Generals ever doing this for any other video in the Romans or anything, so this seems to be a unique thing, at least in this video. We're going to be watching a lot more Kings and Generals, so he might do it in other videos, but I find it interesting that I kind of like that whole thing. So yeah, but dude, Eumenes, man, immediately destroyed, you know, Antigonus's left. Wow. And I also kind of like he took some of his horsemen, moved, and then they zoomed and attacked the left of Antigonus, destroying it. So now Antigonus's left is gone, and the center battle is just gonna insane. Phalanx on phalanx, silver shields. This is just an epic battle, you know? One that even the mighty Heracles would gaze upon with amazement, you know? Man.
Nemean lion ensued. The enemies pushed against each other, but the Eumenid force had an advantage. They experienced silver shields. These elderly warriors had experienced combat under both Philip and Alexander the Great.
Yeah, I'd heard some of these silver shields were like in their 60s or 70s and still on the battlefield. These are tough old men still hanging in with the young kids. And I remember in the Pyrrhus of Epirus series, something interesting about the Pyrrhus of Epirus series is that they said often that phalanx on phalanx battle will just go to whoever the more experienced one. You know, so it really seemed like kind of a gamble, these phalanx on phalanx battles. It's whoever's the most disciplined and just has the more experience will win. But it seems like kind of 50-50, like almost like a flip of a coin. Like, you know, really up to chance. And so that kind of scares me. But things are going well for now. But then again, Antigonus can break the left of Eumenes, and then it would just be chaos, right? Like, I do know Antigonus does become a big player, at least if I'm remembering correctly, so I'm thinking Eumenes might lose this. I could be wrong, but I'm thinking Eumenes might lose.
Great. And despite being in their 60s, they fought expertly and broke their opposing phalanx. The Antigonid infantry was in disarray. However, Antigonos was not one to give up easily and pushed his own flank forward. With overwhelming force, he managed to crush the enemy flank. Antigonos had won his section of the theatre of the contest, but Eumenes had won the battle as a whole, having lost only 540 infantry, a handful of cavalry, and 900 wounded.
Wow, dang. Never mind, forget what I said. Like I said, I've so far, if you guys have noticed, I've kind of been a big fan of Eumenes. I'm kind of a bit of me, like, kind of rooting for the guy. I don't know, I find him interesting. I don't know why I'm taking a liking to him, but I just have, so I don't know.
Antigonos' 3,700 infantry, 54 cavalry, and 4,000 wounded. Knowing his army's morale was low, Antigonos waited until nightfall and then left the field. Eumenes was gleeful and retreated to his winter quarters, expecting no further battles. Time would prove him wrong. Antigonos retreated back into Media, while Eumenes moved to winter in Gabiini. While in Media, Antigonos conspired to catch the old fox Eumenes by surprise. So he took part of his army and marched through the cold Persian winter of 316 BCE, trekking through the harsh terrain and Angra blizzard storms.
Despite being defeated, I could see Antigonus is taking a bold strategy, a winter crossing, attacking when Eumenes would least expect. Alright, smart on his part. Again, both of these guys are really cunning in their own way, but Antigonus definitely does seem... I could see this. He's gonna catch Eumenes off guard and probably break him.
Somehow, this plan was discovered by Eumenes, who scrambled his troops and organized them for a fight. To intimidate Antigonos, he put small contingents on the various hills and then lit campfires to give the impression that their forces were massive in size. Antigonos held back from the attack, waiting for the rest of his army to make the trek and join him. The two armies met in the field.
I love the psychological warfare these two have. I find this to be the most interesting rivalry so far. Antigonus and Eumenes. Like, Antigonus' last battle they had, from last video, I think, he like stretched out his phalanxes to make it give the illusion that he had the larger army, and now Eumenes is lighting a bunch of fires to give the impression he has the bigger army. It's just like the battle of the tricksters, which I find so fascinating.
Fields of Gabiini. Antigonos' army consisted of 22,000 heavy infantry, 9,000 cavalry, and 65 elephants. Eumenes' army consisted of 36,700 infantry, 6,000 cavalry, and 114 elephants. The plains of Gabiini were wide and open, providing ample opportunity for formation combat. Antigonos put Python with the cavalry on the left flank, while he and Demetrios took up the right flank at the command of their most elite troops. The center included the cavalry, with the elephants in front as a vanguard. Eumenes put himself at the left flank of his own formation, leading the cavalry, placing the silver shields next to him, and placing the rest of the infantry across the rest of the line, with the elephants similarly spread out as a vanguard. The right flank included light cavalry and some backup elephants. Eumenes began by commanding the elephants in the left and center to begin marching. He then took his own troops on the left flank and pushed forward behind them. The Persian deities which roamed these lands must have laughed at the man's hubris, as the elephants caused mass sand clouds to emerge behind them, blinding the advancing cavalry. Antigonos instantly pounced at the opportunity. Using the cover of the sands, he sent part of his light cavalry to go across the lines. He made it to the baggage of the Eumenes troops and seized it. Eumenes struck into Antigonos' lines, but the charge failed. Bukestas, who was with Eumenes in the cavalry charge, felt that all was lost and retreated with his forces, while Eumenes...
Dang. Who knew it would be the elephants? I'm telling you, the elephants can sometimes be more of a detriment, but the fact that they created a storm cloud and they just win... Dang, dude.
...was left to hold the line. The silver shields could not have appeared at a more desperate moment, as they marched behind the elephants and pummeled Antigonos' infantry, crushing through part of the formation. The chaos led to a stalemate, as both sides moved back to their camps.
Holy crap, silver shields are carrying. These guys are insane, like... Man, they might have somewhat saved the effort there, but still, again, Eumenes suffered a lot, especially being raided from behind. Holy crap.
As night fell, Eumenes hoped to rally the disgruntled troops to fight the next day. But news of the heist of the baggage train reached camp, and this led to anger amongst the troops. It was at this point that the Silver Shields, who found Eumenes' origins in southern Greece and not in Macedonia to be a point of distrust, staged a revolt. The Silver Shields were always on the march, so the baggage train included their families and everything they held as their own property. Thus, they felt betrayed by Eumenes and disillusioned with his skills as a general. They captured the old warrior and brought him before Antigonos. Despite being delivered to his enemy on a silver platter, or shield in this case, Antigonos was hesitant to execute Eumenes, still having respect for the man. However, after much deliberation and self-reflection, he ultimately ordered that the old Diadochi be put to the sword.
Dang. Rip Eumenes. Again, we do know the Macedonians are beyond fickle and willing to just turn on their leaders, and the Silver Shields showed that. Dang, man. Rip Eumenes, man. Pretty good showing overall. Like, he was definitely... I found him super interesting. But Antigonus came out, mainly due to luck right there at the end, though. Like, I don't know if they had had another battle right there, if who would have prevailed, but... yeah.
Thus, Eumenes of Cardia died on that day, ending the war in the east. Eudamos and Antigones were also executed, and the Silver Shields, proven to be untrustworthy after killing their commander, were sent to Arachosia to fight until they all perished. In the west, after a long struggle, Cassander gained the upper hand. Given that Polyperchon was conducting his war poorly, and had lost both in Byzantium and Megalopolis, more and more Polys began to join Cassander's side. Athens was firmly with Cassander, as were multiple other states. Thus he marched on to Pella and managed to conquer the city. Polyperchon managed to flee Macedonia and moved to the Peloponnese, where some remnant Polys like Corinth were still in favour of him. He was reduced to a minor player, though one that was still active in the shifting Hellenistic alliances of the day. Olympias, however, was found and captured in Pydna, alongside Roshanak, Alexander IV, Cassander's brother, and some other captives. Cassander decided to kill the mother of the late great conqueror, but the troops who loved Alexander refused to do the deed. Instead, her demise was left to the families of the people she had schemed against and murdered, who are said to have stoned her to death, with Cassander leaving her unburied. He took Roshanak and Alexander as prisoners to stay in Pella. The end of the Second War.
Dang, that's, dang, that... yeah, Olympias was an interesting figure who I've heard a lot about. Probably a little unhinged. But she was kind of a player there at the end. It's interesting to just watch her get killed. And as we know, Cassander's just gonna kill... I think it said he kills Alexander's wife and child, so... yeah, Cassander's all over the place. Wow.
Of the Diadochi in 316 BCE dramatically shifted Hellenistic geopolitics. After its conclusion, Cassander was the master of Greece, bordering Lysimachos' Thracian territories. Meanwhile, a vast territory, including Egypt, Cyrene, Syria, Libya, Cyprus, and other islands, was under Ptolemy. Antigonos now ruled all of Persia and Asia Minor, and was the undisputed top Keberos in Asia. This stoked fear in the hearts of the other Diadochi, and the next year, the Third War of the Diadochi began.
So I'm gonna end the video right here. That was the end of the Second War. Tomorrow we will move towards the third one. Bye everyone.